Well, hello and good afternoon. Yeah, it is afternoon. Another video. A couple days ago, June 6th, was the invasion of Normandy, France, the second front in the West against Germany. I'm not going to say Nazi Germany because everybody's Naziing and it gets old. Against Germany, where via air and via sea, these guys came into play as a Kobe figure with an M1 carbine into liberating Western Europe and pushing the Germans back into Germany. So, when they landed in France, they were all stuck over by the beaches where the fortifications were. If you ever watched Saving Private Ryan and you see everybody getting shot by the MG-42 German machine guns, and then they had to position their way in, which is actually true. But once they broke their way into those fortifications and out, then what happened? They went into what's called the hedgerow country, which is basically kind of like yard waste slash foliage that they picked up in making the land usable farmland. So what they did was they piled all this stuff on the ends, making this impenetrable thing of lawn waste, trees, wood, basically like a big compost thing around the sides. Well, it made for like good fortification and places to hide. Tall enough to camouflage and hide things such as this. And this is a very deadly tank during the breakout. This is a Panzer IV, Panzerkampfwagen. The Panzer IV, this one has a 75 millimeter long barreled gun, 80 millimeters of armor, and it's a 7.5 CMK WK40 L43 or L48 basically pack gun, powered by a Maybach 12-cylinder gasoline engine. They can do like 32 miles an hour top speed, but this is a primary German tank. You see on movies a Panther tank and a Tiger tank, and they were more prevalent out east against the Soviet Union, but they did come into play. Now, you would see them during the breakout, but initially, this baby here was the king of battle. Now, going up against it was a basic Sherman tank, which you've seen in the movie Fury. To get this tank, you needed a decent gun that penetrated its armor. So what you had was the new Sherman tank with the horizontal suspension system on it, and my Sherman tank is falling apart already. What the heck was that? Something fell off. Well, we'll figure it out. But you have this tank basically engaged in fighting with the Panzer IV. This version of the HHSV M4 is an M4A2 with a 76 millimeter gun, and it is powered by a General Motors diesel engine. Not a bad tank. It's not the V8 or the EZ8, the Ford engine, and you did not see a lot of these in Europe. Most of them, when in the Pacific, the Marines used them, the Soviets used them. The V8 powered Ford V8 EZ8 was the one that was made, but these were there. And like I said, this engine did pretty well in here, and these tanks performed pretty well. Basically, they had 63 millimeters of armor going around the turret. The slope in the front was 47, I don't know how many degrees, 45 degrees, I believe, 47 millimeter slope, translating into 93.1 millimeter armor. So this thing could survive hits and give punishment. The 76 millimeter gun could penetrate 125 millimeters of armor from, I don't know how many yards, 500 yards or so, I think. I'm not sure, maybe 1,000 yards, but you'd see this coming off for the American forces. And the British had the Sherman, and also the Canadians had the Sherman. But the thing that made this battle thing unique is you have a variation of different tanks than you would have with the Canadians and the British. This is the Cromwell. It's a cruiser tank capable of 42 miles an hour, powered by a 600 horsepower Rolls-Royce Meteor engine, and it had a 75 millimeter QF gun, British gun, and it was a good hard-hitting gun. I don't know how it would do in a direct fight with the Mark IV, but coming on the flank, on the sides, this tank could devastate because it was faster than the Mark IV, could get around it, and like I said, flank it. And I'm sure the British probably used flanking as part of a way to stop the fighting with the Germans. This tank was considered a cruiser tank. And what a cruiser tank is, basically what the word says, it cruises along. And the thing is to give it more speed and abilities when it's out on the battlefield. If you notice, it's a slower profile than the Mark IV. The Mark IV could present a big target, and with the Cromwell coming off to the sides, its gun could penetrate the side armor on a Mark IV. Now, the big thing to remember here is in these tank versus tank battles here, you have rudimentary sighting equipment and stuff, better abilities on the battlefield, but still these are old style tanks. It was World War II. The winner of these battles was usually the tank that saw the other tank first and got a nice good hit on it and then took it out. You saw that in Fury. Although Fury had some things about it which I think were kind of like weird. Main thing being that you had to shoot the Tiger tank from behind, not with the 76 millimeter gun Sherman. If you got the shot off first and you were in a nice position, you could get it off to the front on the turret, and the 76 millimeter will penetrate and take it out. Against the Mark IV, the big thing here is whoever got the first shot off, because either tank could destroy the other tank. The 76 on the Sherman could easily penetrate the armor, which is only 81, I believe, at its most thickest point on the Mark IV. And oh boy, this tank just loves to come apart. And the Mark IV, on the other hand, from long distance, with this gun, and this is basically kind of the same gun the Panther had. The Panther's was even nicer than the version that's in the Mark IV. Could kill from far away. It didn't have to worry about putting its armor at risk. It could go, and the Germans had great optics. Line up, and boom, this gun would go right through the armor on a Sherman or on a Cromwell. The thing with the Cromwell that the Sherman didn't have was high speed and ability to be maneuverable. And like I said, taking that side shot, which would definitely take out a Mark IV. So there you have it with basic tanks that were on the Western Front after the D-Day invasion. I did not do a Churchill tank. I don't have a model of one. And I don't have a 75 millimeter Sherman. All my Shermans are 76 millimeter versions, like you see here. The nice thing about this little display, all these are 135 scale Kobe models, so they're all within scale. Kobe doesn't have a 128 scale British tank, I don't believe. Most of them are 135th scale. Most of Kobe tanks are 135th, but the 128 scale is mostly the World War II tanks, and they're a lot bigger, and I have them on a shelf behind me, and I have an Easy 8 there, I have a Jumbo Sherman, and I have a T-34, it's 128, a Panther, and a Mark III with a 50 millimeter gun. But basically these three tanks would have been there in Normandy slugging it out. What was the result? Well, we know the Germans lost, backed out. General Patton got involved in the breakout, and the Germans were on their heels running back to Germany through France. So that's what happened at the end of this. Are these tanks perfect for what they were being used for? No. But they did have things that each one of them offered that made them useful on the battlefield. And when they're in the hedgerow country, the Cromwell actually did pretty good for what it was, because it could maneuver fast, lower profile, and it could see the Mark IV tank, which is a lot larger profile-wise, and take the shot on the side to knock the armor out on this thing. And actually, the Mark IV is a pretty big tank compared to the Sherman and the Cromwell, because you could see that by the size variations here. One more time, looking at the Sherman E2 diesel powered. And that's basically what you had breaking out of Normandy. And from there on through France and into Germany. But that started it all. The June 6th invasion, the hedgerow battles that followed the breakout, and the actual breakout across France and Germany. And with that, I will end this video. The reason I did this was because I don't hear a lot of celebration or acknowledgement to what happened during World War II. It's kind of been put to the side with all the goofiness that's out there and people watch and obsess on. They should reinvestigate history of things that we did and find out that our country's not as rotten as people think. We've done a lot of good things throughout and still do, and one of the biggest was to liberate Europe from Nazi Germany, basically the ideology and the militarism. The only sad thing was Germany's trying to set up Europe as like a United States, and basically they did. The EU, the common market, that was in place, set up by the German occupation of Western Europe. And a lot of people say, no, but yeah. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. You see what the world is like today. It inherited what can be considered like bad stuff from Germany and Germany's occupation, but they took some things and streamlined it and used it to fit the narrative of what they wanted for Western Europe. And that's what you see now if you watch old movies and stuff, and I'll give you kind of a battlefield look at things, but it all comes down to this guy here. This guy, the infantryman marching between the tanks, assure the Allied tanks of victory against the Germans. The Germans had that same thing with the infantry supporting the tanks by moving in the tank in turn, supporting the infantry by killing off other tanks and by using high explosive shells to crush the infantry in fortified positions that they were going against. Unfortunately for the Germans at this point, they were fighting a defensive war with a little bit of offensive in there to keep them on balance, but they just didn't have it. The combined force of the United States, Britain, Canada, and all three of those countries are producing tanks. I mean, they were outnumbered, basically. Were these tanks that the Americans and the British had perfect? Not really, but they were still learning and improving. But the tanks that they had at the time of D-Day were good enough to do the job with the right training, the right leadership, and the right amount of infantry doing what the infantry does and supporting the armor in a forward movement against the enemy's armor. And with that, that's where I'll end this. My next video that I'm thinking about is a video, Pacific War, basically an oddball kind of one. It'd be the P-47, the Razorback version, 1943, breaking in the South Pacific, fighting Zeros and Tony fighter planes. And I do have a Tony fighter plane, and I have a P-47, and I have a model of a Zero that I'm going to put together, and then early next week, I'll have that video ready to go. I want to keep putting at least one video a week, and mostly reflecting on World War II, because right now, in a chronology, you're looking at what happened on D-Day and the troops moving in, and I can incorporate aircraft and other tanks and kind of show you what you were seeing when those later battles erupted. But I'm going to leave this video here, and I hope everybody has a nice weekend and nice day, and hopefully I'll be able to go and shave myself. My Temu sourced electric razor died. I couldn't fix it because I couldn't open it up. It's all sealed. The lithium-ion battery went poof. So go get another inexpensive one. It lasted 6 months. Can't complain about that, considering the inexpensive price, but that's neither here nor there. I will see everybody next week, and have a good weekend.